Okay friends, so today I am going to show you how to make a lid for your pinch pot. I've got my pinch pot here and I've worked at making the opening nice and round, nice and level all the way across. So you can look across, kind of figure out where you need to remove any bumps. And I have yet to really go through the process of really detailing and smoothing because I haven't decided what I want to do with my pinch pot yet. But I'm at a good place where I can start to work on making the lid, which components include a base, a lid collar, which is the coil that we're going to attach that fits inside of the pinch pot so that the lid doesn't fall off, as well as your lid handle. Now, all of these things are going to depend on what you want to make with your pinch pot. And if you have a specific item that you're making, that might change your ultimate approach on your lid. But I'm going to show you a couple tips and tricks for some different ways of going about it so you can determine what's going to work best for you. So the first thing that we're going to need to know is the shape and size that we're going for. And there's a wide variety of things that you can do in order to make sure that you have the right size lid for your project. One thing that you could do is look around your house for things like cookie cutters, even jars or cups or glasses in your cupboard are going to be a real help for determining overall shape. So you could see that this one here I cut using this cookie cutter, and this smaller one I cut using this biscuit cutter here. And so if you don't have cookie cutters at home, it's no problem. Open up your kitchen cabinets. You might be surprised at what you find. But ultimately, there's a couple other ways of cutting out lids to determine, to make it fit. The first thing that you're going to need is to get a nice soft piece of clay and flatten it into a pancake. So you can see here I have what's called a slab of clay, just a thin sheet of clay. So I've taken my hand and I've flattened it out like a pancake, and I've taken a sponge and I've cleaned up that slab to just make it nice and clean and neat on both sides. Then I could use that to obviously cut out my base. In this case, I have two bases cut using cookie cutters. Another way, if you don't have a glass or a cookie cutter or something to cut it, is you could simply turn over your pinch pot on top of your slab and use a knife or some sort of tool to trim around all the way around the edge, which of course would then cut out the circular shape that fits your pinch pot. Because I have these two cookie cutters, I'm going to move forward using these, and you could determine what's going to work best for you. Now, if you wanted a flat lid, you might choose one that's a little bit smaller, and you can see that this lid fits a little bit smaller, and I could kind of change the bevel, which means the edge. If I don't want it too squared off, I can kind of push down and soften it and have a smaller lid. Or if I wanted a slightly larger lid, I could use one that's slightly larger. Or if I wanted more like a conical shape, I can push my fingers up in the middle. Let's say you were making like an apple or a round object, like a baseball. You might want a lid that goes up in the middle, in which case just by pushing in with your thumbs and down with your fingers, you could see you make like almost like a little mini bowl. And that would work out well if you wanted it to have a rounded top shape. And you can continue to work with the shape of your base to fit your pinch pot and what you want to work with. So you can see how that would ultimately be more of a rounded shape on top. I'm going to work with this smaller one because I kind of like the idea that the lid is slightly smaller, and I could also work with that edging to sort of fit the way that I like it, but I'm kind of digging the way that looks, so I'm going to move forward with this smaller. Now, as I mentioned, this lid has three different components: the base, the collar, and the handle. The first thing that we're going to want to start with is the collar. Now, the collar starts with a rope of clay, also known as a coil, and you just simply make a coil by squeezing a piece of soft clay and into like a hot dog shape, and then rolling it on your table with nice even pressure. Now we're going to go into coil making later in the trimester, but for now You just really need to make a nice even coil, much like you did for the coil foot. It's a very similar process in attaching a coil for the lid collar. The most important thing to note is that that clay donut that we're going to attach to the base of your lid needs to fit within the inside rim of your pinch pot. One reminder is that coils like to break on you, so the best thing you could do is keep it nice and hydrated with some water, spray bottle, and when you go to turn it into a clay donut, just go really slow. Otherwise it could crack on you, and don't try to make it angry. Coils like to get angry if you try to move them too quickly. So just be patient. If your clay starts cracking, add some water and then slow it down and kind of help it along. So when you're trying to determine the inside shape, what I like to do is make kind of like a number 9 and roll it around on itself until you know that that coil fits on the inside rim of your pinch pot. So I'm going to take a fettling knife and I'm going to trim it and remove the excess and then make what I like to call a clay donut. I'm just going to blend together that coil. So now I have my little clay donut that ultimately I'm going to attach to the bottom of my lid to become a lid collar. Now what's nice if you do this all on the same day is this clay is of the same wetness as the lid clay because I just cut the lid. And so I know that slipping and scoring is not as essential. Now you're always welcome to slip and score. It's never going to hurt. But if you know that your clay is of the same wetness, you could very easily just use the blending process to be able to attach it. So again, I know that this fits on the inside edge and this is the bottom of my lid. So I'm going to find the center of my lid, and because this base is still pretty soft, I'm going to be pretty gentle, and I'm going to start to use a modeling tool. Now you guys have your popsicle sticks in your kits, and I'm going to take part of that coil down and in, just like we did on the base of our pinch pot on the coil foot. Half that coil down and in, being really gentle. Now if you want to wait until these get a little bit more leather hard, or at least the base, that is going to help have a little bit more stability, but it's not essential as long as you're really gentle. You can see how I can kind of smooth it out. And you're going to want to do that on the outside edge and the inside edge. So blend it all the way on the outside and the inside edge. So you could see if I go around all the way, I'm going to combine those two pieces of clay, that coil and the base, to include a lid collar. And again, that collar is going to help keep the top from flying off. Remember, once these get glazed, the glaze is liquid glass and it's very slippery, and ultimately without this collar your lid could just fly off and fall on the floor and break, so we want to keep that from happening. So again, you could take some time to clean it up, use your sponge, really kind of make it nice and neat so that you know that that collar is centered, is blended on, and is one unit. Now for the sake of time, I'm going to move forward to the lid handle, but obviously once this sets up and gets a little firmer, you could see how we can really make it nice and neat and clean, and ultimately you would have a lid whose lid collar fits within that opening so that that lid doesn't fly right off. All right, so now we've got our lid and our lid collar. And now we get the opportunity to determine what do we want to make for our handle. Remember, our handle is what is going to help remove the lid, something for you to hang on to. Now, this is just a simple little rainbow. You could probably come up with something more exciting. I encourage you to think through what do you like in your life. Maybe it's a little sculpture, maybe it's a letter or a fun icon. In this example, I'm going to show you the little rainbow because there's a couple things that I think really help to understand about something with such small surface area. But again, you have the opportunity to create whatever it is that you want. Also, just a quick note, if you liked the sort of rounded type of lid, you would go through this same process as we did on this one. You would just build up your coils by using more of them. You could see if I put this coil on and I blended it on, and then I put another coil and blended that on, now you could see how it's much thicker, and that would then sit within the opening. So you just need to kind of adjust if you have a shape that has more of like a mushroom top. Can you see that there? So that ultimately when it goes on, that would go deep enough to sit within the opening. If you just put one coil on, you could see how that's not thick enough, and if you put it on, there's really nothing going in the opening of the pinch pot. So you need to kind of build that up either by using a much thicker coil or even using a slab coil that's just much thicker. Think like a belt. So you could see how if this looked much nicer and you put it on the inside, it's much thicker and then sits out further. So if I wanted to attach my little rainbow here that I've kind of let set up a little bit, it's lost a little bit of its moisture, so it's a little sturdy. I want to obviously trim it. This would be very awkward if this whole thing sat on top of here. So I'm going to trim it about halfway maybe. And I'm going to determine where on my lid I want to put it. Let's say I wanted to put it right in the middle, which is pretty typical. I would make sure it's centered, and then I would use any kind of tool that has a sharp object or a sharp point to give myself a little bit of information. And that information is going to tell me where the base of the bottom of the lid handle meets. And that is where ultimately I'm going to slip and score so that it stays put. So in this particular case, you see I'm going to rough up where it meets the base. I'm going to do that both on the inside edge here and the base. And then I'm going to want to use a little bit of that clay glue, the slip. Clay plus water acts like glue. And then I'm going to attach it to the base. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure and give it a minute to hold on to it. Here's where you might want to use a wet paintbrush. I just have my slip here right now. Get a little bit of water here. You might use I've got another paintbrush in here. Wet paintbrush around where it meets the base. Kind of clean it up a little bit. And that helps kind of make it nice and neat. Now, one thing that you'll need to know is anything that has very little surface area, which we know the only thing connecting this rainbow to the base is just these tiny little ends of this coil. There's a trick that you could do that's going to really help keep that all together, and that's simply by creating some support coils. So what you're going to want to do, anywhere where you have very little attachment space, you're going to want to create like little tiny worms, and keeping them nice and hydrated is really helpful. Sometimes I'll just spray water in my hand and then I'll keep rolling, and that helps kind of soften the clay up while you're rolling it. And you could see how this is just a little skinny worm, but by wrapping it around the bases of this rainbow, you can see I'm making a little collar. So I'm going to kind of pinch off where it meets itself, and I'm going to very carefully and gently blend that base both into the pot, or excuse me, the lid, really gently, and into the rainbow. So what you're doing here is you're creating a little support coil that's going to help keep that rainbow in place. And it might not seem like a lot of clay. You might be surprised at how little clay you actually need to develop a nice base support system. If the clay is nice and soft, you should be able to just use your fingers. Sometimes the back of a paintbrush is actually a really helpful tool. I'll kind of press it in. Use it to press up, use it to press down. You could see how it helps you get into hard to reach places. And then ultimately you can clean it all up and know that now this side, because it has that support coil, is so much stronger. I could even feel its strength. You can almost even see its strength. This side is all kind of loosey-goosey, and this side has a lot more stability to it. And so no matter what it is that you're choosing to attach, if there's opportunities to add little support coils around or next to that you ultimately blend in, you're going to be that much more successful in that piece staying put and on there. And so here's now where you might take your wet paintbrush, clean it all up, and you can see how pretty easily I've now created half of a stable little rainbow. And you could keep working at detailing and cleaning it up and all the things that you want to do to it. So ultimately you could see here how this side is much more likely to stay than this side. Even though it's possible, it's still got a little bit of strength because we slipped and scored. A little baby coil around anything that you choose to attach is going to be that much more likely to stay put. So obviously as this starts to firm up, I could already feel that even just in the few minutes we've been chatting, my base is a little bit stronger. I'm able to kind of move it around a little, clean it up. I could go back in and shift it a little. If it's not perfectly centered, you can kind of move your coil a little bit, push, pull, go around and around, and clean it all up so that once it's leather hard, you have a nice, perfect lid that fits within the opening and a fun and detailed lid handle that helps you remove it from the top. So again, you might choose to do a letter or a shape. Maybe you have some other cookie cutters. Maybe you want to do a little sculpture and you make a cool little, doodad that ultimately you want to slip and score onto the lid. And of course you'd go through the same process of just slipping and scoring, attaching some slip, and then blending it on. Just remember, rule of thumb, you don't want to work thicker than the width of your thumb. So anything that you do on top, just make sure to keep that in mind so that you don't trap any air and it doesn't explode on you. But ultimately, you get the opportunity to make your pinch pot what it is that you want. At that point, you can let it firm up a little bit more. You can smooth it out. Obviously, a sponge over and over and over is going to really help smooth it out. I saw many people today carving or adding little three-dimensional elements. So once you get your pinch pot, your coil foot, your lid collar, and lid handle, those are the requirements for the project, along, of course, with your name and period number carved on the bottom. And you can decorate your piece as you wish.